And we're off.
Okay.
Okay.
We be live.
We're live. So I'm gonna make this look more like Donna than me.
We had still been in a practice session, so I don't know if that's,
We're just not live to the public quite yet.
yeah, okay, there we are.
This to Donna. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna have it remember me. Yeah, and then you should be able to get it rescribed. Okay, I'm glad I was here.
Thank you.
That was so weird. What happened?
I don't know, but I'll watch for it next time.
Okay, thank you,
All right.
ma'am. Thanks.
Okay. So I think we about have a wrap on our technical difficulties for the evening, so smooth sailing from here on out.
Good evening, everyone. Can y'all hear me? All right. All right, I think we have a quorum here. We might as well get started. Welcome, everyone, to the May 18th meeting of the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And could we please have the roll call done? Thanks. Oh.
You're muted, Donna.
I thought it was my computer.
There we go. Are we on live now?
Yep, we can hear
Okay.
you loud and clear.
Sean McCoy.
Here.
Sean McCoy is present. Dave Loomis.
Here.
Dave Loomis is present. Micah Sewell.
Here.
Micah Sewell is present. Jim Bichon is going to be absent. Andy Mefford is not here. Josh Schrader has a conflict. Toon Pham is doing some little bit of traveling for work. Neva Hassanen.
Here.
Neva Hassanen's present. Shane Morrissey.
Present.
Shane Morrissey is present. Elizabeth Costello.
Present.
Elizabeth Costello is present. Vince Caristo.
Present.
Vince Caristo is present. Mr. Chair, there are 6 regular members and 1 alternate. Would you like to appoint Elizabeth Costello as a regular voting member tonight?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next item is approving the minutes from our last meeting, which was on May 4th. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review those. Are there any additions or revisions that folks would like to make, or a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you, Shane. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sean. So all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. Next up, we have public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if we could please have on the screen the information on how to connect and make public comment. If anyone here is listening or have already joined the meeting and would like to make a comment on anything at all, this is the time. The phone number to call is 1-253-215-8782, and the meeting ID is 842-9399-6424. And please use the raise hand function in your Zoom console to indicate your desire to speak. And if you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand. So I'll give a few minutes for folks to call in. I'll go mute myself. Okay, it's been a few minutes and there is no one that I can see that desires to speak. So we'll move on to the next portion of the meeting, which is staff announcements. So we have one announcement tonight, welcoming a new member to the planning board. Welcome, Elizabeth. Would you like to maybe say a few words about yourself?
Sure. I'm Ellie Costello, or Elizabeth, and I manage the tasting room over at Western Cider. And I'm just glad to be here. Glad to be joining you all. I did just get appointed last week and just got the agenda and minutes and things like that sent to me about an hour or two ago. So I have not reviewed things. So I'm probably going to be abstaining from voting on most things. Today.
Okay, yeah, understood. And you were appointed by City Council, right?
Yeah,
Ellie?
I was appointed by City Council.
Okay, great. And Ellie will be an alternate member. I think at the last meeting was announced Shane was moved up to the regular voting member by the City Council. So welcome, Ellie. Okay, so tonight we have one public hearing, which is the Pontiac Commercial Subdivision, and Tim Worley from the County Community and Planning Services is here to talk about that. So Tim.
Yeah, good evening, members of Planning Board. I'm Tim Worley, Senior Planner with CAPS, and the subdivision that was supposed to be presented tonight is Pontiac Commercial Subdivision. Representatives for the developer have requested to leave the hearing open and not present tonight. They're trying to sort through an issue related to a variance. So my recommendation would be to leave the hearing open tonight and take comment from any public that may be present to comment on this item.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll go right into the public comment period here. So if we could get those instructions back on the screen for folks to make a comment. So if anyone who is joining us or otherwise viewing and would like to make a comment on this subdivision, this would be the time. And so the instructions are the same as before. You can either join through the Zoom console or via phone. And when you do join, please use the raise hand function to indicate your desire to speak. It'll be either in the Zoom console and on the bottom right hand, right center of the console, or by pressing *9 on your phone. So I'll go on mute for a couple of minutes and give folks a chance to do that. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll close the public comment portion of this item and move on. So that'll conclude this item for this evening, and we'll see you again, Tim, I guess, in the future. So thank you. So next we have communications and special presentations. We have one tonight from another team at Missoula County Community and Planning Services. I think we have Andrew Hagemeyer, Jenny Dixon, and Lindsay Romanello. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
How you doing? Yeah, you bet. Yep, Jenny's here. Say hi, Jenny.
Hi.
And Karen's lurking out there too, but she's
Great,
not
so
presenting.
you're going to talk to us about the Missoula County zoning code update.
Yeah, so exciting. All right, give me a second to figure out share screen here appropriately. I always seem to screw it up. All right. Hopefully with any luck, you can see my PowerPoint presentation. Awesome. And then let me bring it to slideshow. And let me just do a little test here. Do you see the slides changing?
Yes.
Okay, we went through this morning with the steering committee. I was changing the slides and no one saw me change. The slides weren't actually changing. So it was kind of funny. I made it through 4 slides before anyone pointed it out. I think they would have let me go on the whole meeting. All right, so yeah, I'm Andrew Hagemeyer. I'm a planner with Missoula County, and with us is Jenny. Jenny, you say hi. Introduce yourself.
Hi. Hi again. I'm Jenny Dixon, planner with Community and Planning Services.
Yep. And we are here to present on the Missoula, give the planning board an introduction to the Missoula County Zoning Code update. You know, we've been working on this for a long time, and we've finally got it to a point where there is a draft, and that draft is to a level that we can start sharing, handing out, and seeing where it goes. So that tonight we're going to present on that draft, and all right. So our objectives tonight with this is to first of all discuss the process. So where we are today, and where are we going with this project? What's going to happen over the course of the next 6 months? We're going to introduce the planning board to some content. We're not going to get in the weeds tonight. We're going to stay pretty high level because we basically have to introduce you to the entire code. And then what we're hoping to do after we do a quick introduction is talk generally about what areas of interest you as planning board members have individually or as a board in terms of the zoning, and try to hone in. What we're going to do is we're going to hear you out. So, you know, you're going to tell us, we want to hear about this, we want to learn about that, we want to be involved with this. And then over the course of the summer, hopefully you guys don't get inundated with the zillion subdivisions again, like you were last summer. And hopefully over the course of the summer, we plan to hold workshops with you, where we come to these meetings with these specific content areas, and we workshop them as a group. So you guys have a really high level of understanding of where the code is when it comes to for your public hearings. So like I said, the draft is here. We have a draft zoning code and draft zoning map. We are calling this the public working draft because it's months away from being a planning board draft, being ready for the planning board. The code is available on our website, I believe. Did you get a link? If you didn't get a link, we will get you a link. It's too big to email, so we're going to post the link online so you can get it. And the zoning map is also ready. It's draft. However, we're having some technical challenges getting the zoning map put on the website in a way you can view it. We've tried and it comes out really grainy. Until we get our map viewer built, It's probably just going to be a downloadable PDF. I'll get into that a little bit more. So timeline, today, May 18th. Today is the day the draft is stamped. It's time stamped May 18th. You will see on the draft, it says draft May 18th. And we're calling it the public working draft. This is our soft launch. It's like a restaurant. We're open now for business, but we're not telling everybody about it yet because we're not quite ready for inundation of customers. We're gonna, engage the planning board, engage our steering committee. We're going to open lands committee on Thursday, and kind of, introduce the code to a few boards, and then county boards and things like that. While we prepare for the release, the public release, our grand opening, you might say, which is going to happen sometime in June. We're waiting because we don't have all our public facing tools ready yet. And so if we did a big presentation and press release and sent it out to all the community stakeholders and community members, we just wouldn't have the ability to interact appropriately yet. So soft launch, that's the soft launch. We're going to work through the public with this draft though for a good 2 months of public, basically workshopping it with the public for about 2 months. And if it all goes well, we're hoping to bring a draft for public hearings to the planning board in September. I expect there will be quite a few hearings. I doubt we'll be able to get through it in one hearing. I would think probably around 4 hearings is my gut with the planning board. And then once we get it through you with a thumbs up, then we'll take it to the Board of County Commissioners and hopefully have the code effective by the end of the year. So public outreach, super important part of this process. We'll begin the public outreach in earnest in June. Once we have the website set up, once we have our open house events scheduled, the online mapping tool functioning. So these are the tools we're gonna use. We're gonna have an online mapping and comment tool. So you'll be able to look up your property, see what you're zoned today, see what you would be zoned under the new code and map, and have a basic summary of the differences between the two. We're gonna do some in-person open house events to engage people directly. We'll have a comment tool where you'll actually be able to go into the code, the draft, the actual text of the code, and leave comments saying, yeah, I like this, I don't like this. We're gonna reach out to a lot of stakeholders. Stakeholders will be involved at different levels. We'll start with the stakeholders that we believe are going to be the most interested in a draft and the code, because we believe it won't just be one meeting, it'll be multiple meetings. We'll have online topical specific workshops. So for example, a workshop on agricultural tools, a workshop on housing. We might have workshops on geographic areas if there's specific interest in like a neighborhood like East Missoula or Target Range have enough interest to have a specific topic for a geographic area. Of course, we'll be doing the planning board workshops through the course of the summer. And we also have our steering committee that we'll be engaging with in a very similar way that we're going to engage the planning board. So what has gotten us to where we are today? What all went into this draft that we are sort of unveiling to you tonight? First of all, the foundational element is the Missoula area land use element. That this code is an implementation of that plan. So all of that public outreach that we did with the Missoula area land use element, all of that engagement, all of those hearings, all of those nights we spent together as a planning board and staff working through that, all of that has already been incorporated in the code. That has, through the Missoula area land use element. Look at that as an extension of all of that outreach, as an extension of what we're doing today. It's all 100% relevant. The consultant that we had working with us did a zoning audit, and the recommendations from that zoning audit were incorporated into this draft. Our input from our steering committee that we've been meeting with on and off has gone in, and of course staff expertise, and we have engaged agencies, mostly county and city, and some state agencies have been involved with the draft to date. But there's a lot more that needs to go into the draft before we have something that we can call a final product. And again, another round of public input. Stakeholders will be very involved, and we're really looking forward to engaging them. And then, of course, the planning board and your recommendations. Then this all goes in before we get it to the county commissioners.
Quick question, Andrew.
Yep.
This is Neva. What is a zoning audit?
Oh, so it's basically you go through your existing code and you look. You know what? I'm going to have Jenny explain it because she led the zoning audit.
Yeah, and it's been about a year, a little over a year since it was completed, and I can't recall. I know it's on our website, and I can send you a link to it. And it's a report that was issued after about 4 to 6 months of our consultant looking at our current code, our current and at that time in process land use element, to determine where our zoning regulations were not achieving our goals, and goals either stated in our land use element or other county policies. Also, we convened, some of you may have even been present at some of the stakeholder meetings. It was June of, must have been 2019. And we had about 20 different interest areas that met and talked about various topics: agriculture, wireless towers, architectural design, community, neighborhood character preservation. And that all went into a report with a listing. And I think we presented it at planning board, but it's been quite some time, where it just described how we want to see our zoning code, what direction we wanted to go in.
Great.
From where we are today.
Thanks. That helps. It sounds like what I thought it was, but I just wanted to be sure. Appreciate that.
That's a great question. So we're going to get into a little bit into the code. We're going to skip around. Well, we're going to skip chapter 1 because chapter 1's super boring and it's just administrative stuff. And I don't expect any of you on the planning board to really take any interest in it. We're just going to dive into the cool stuff. Jenny will, again, she'll also talk about some boring stuff and kind of gloss over it a little bit as well, but she's really going to focus on the main meat of the fun stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about chapter 2, which is the district standards. So when you think about zoning, you think about there's residential districts and commercial districts. This is chapter 2. So with the main meat of chapter 2, it sets lot sizes. So when we talk about 1 home per 10 acres, that's a lot size. So that's what you'll find in chapter 2. We talk about setbacks and building heights. Those are bulk and dimensional requirements. Pretty standard stuff in most zoning codes. That's also in chapter 2. And then we have a little bit of site design in chapter 2. And kind of that, what you see on the left there is a little bit of site design, but you know, things like saying, put your parking in the back, front porches out front, build 2 zones. Nothing too significant, not nearly as in-depth in site design as you would see in maybe the SWIP-to-KEEN form-based code. And there's also use standards. So we have a table of uses and it says these uses are good for this zone and these uses are good for this zone. I'm going to give you a quick highlight of the different zones. Try not to take up too much time, but our zones are classified into 4 groups, starting with the open lands and agricultural resource districts. We have 4 main districts here. There are sub-districts within some of these districts, but you'll see that when you look at the code. We our first district is a resource and open lands. And this is a zone that is basically intended to be undeveloped. And this zone is applied to our federal lands, our public federal lands, some city or I should say county, so local government owned lands as well, and the floodway, because the floodway is a location where, according to floodplain regulations, you cannot develop in the floodway. We have 3 different agricultural districts. The first is the agricultural reserve. This is agricultural reserve is intended to protect those prime agricultural soils and areas with irrigation facilities. You know, this is the Grass Valley to the northwest of town, and onwards out towards Frenchtown. These are large lots. This is predominantly agriculture. The district is designed to discourage agriculture or uses that are not consistent with agriculture. We have agricultural working. This is the working lands concept from the zoning or the land use element. It's a lot like agriculture, except it's not necessarily connected to soils and irrigation systems. It might be more like ranch land, the North Hills, or timberlands. And then our rural residential agriculture, which now we're starting to get into areas that have already kind of been chopped up a little bit, divided a little bit. You might see 1 home per 10 acres, 1 home per 5 acres, 1 home per 2 acres in these areas. Big flat is an example of that type of a land use pattern. We have a number of residential districts. It starts with rural residential and small agriculture. And the rural residential small agricultural districts are generally, there's 2 homes per acre to 1 home per acre. I think the most prominent land use pattern that we think of for this district or this area is the Target Range area. It still incorporates a lot of agricultural aspects, more so than I think our current code does. But it doesn't include the more intensive agricultural uses like a feedlot or a dairy or something like that. And this area doesn't have water and sewer systems. Now we're at residential though. We're starting to get in the areas that have water and sewer, public water and sewer. And residential is ballpark around 6 homes per acre. You're starting to get in more of single family suburban patterns now. It could be in the city of Missoula. Sometimes these areas could be in the city of Missoula, or you would think they were in the city of Missoula, but these are county areas. In these areas, you're starting, you're seeing predominantly single family uses, but we allow for things like duplexes and ADUs. So we do start to mix housing types a little bit more. And then we move on to the residential medium. It's a lot like residential, but it's starting to get a little bit more intense. You might be able to get up to 11 units per acre in this area, which still sounds dense, but still can be predominantly single family. But you're definitely seeing more duplexes, maybe even a triplex, maybe even a 4plex in the residential medium. And now you're in the neighborhood residential, and now you're really into more of a, I would describe as an urban center, urban location. You're seeing much more intensive residential uses. You're seeing apartment buildings more frequently, still single family, completely appropriate. And you might even start to see a little bit of mixed use in this area, some neighborhood commercial as well. And then the Live Make neighborhood, which is really being championed by places like East Missoula and West Riverside, kind of like residential medium, but a lot more by right commercial and industrial uses in these areas. However, what we do is to allow these things like auto repair shops in a residential neighborhood, we focus on scale. So you'll see the buildings that are non-residential are required to be of a smaller scale. So we don't have giant warehouses and things like that. Wouldn't be inappropriate with a residential area. The Live Make is a really unique situation in the county. It's got a really unique role, a niche, where we're trying to, this is a place where you're living in a pretty tight community, but you can still have a business in your backyard, in your garage. And it could be something like you could do something like small scale manufacturing in that backyard. On to our mixed use districts. Our neighborhood center is what I would kind of describe as what we're trying to achieve is, your small town Main Street type atmosphere, walkable, smaller buildings, mix of uses. Your Main Street is the way I describe it. And then your commercial center can still do mix of uses, but you know what? It's still more auto orientated. You're not going to get a box store in neighborhood center. That wouldn't be permitted. However, in the commercial center, you could get a box store. And then civic employment, this is sort of a really unique zone. It's meant to facilitate both public and private uses that have a real civic purpose. So by private uses would be really limited, but like a hospital is a private use that is absolutely critical to the community. So a hospital you could find in a civic employment center. The airport could be in a civic employment center. We don't have much that would apply in the county right now because while we were doing the land use element, they zoned the airport from us, or they annexed the airport from us. So where we do have it is the DNRC offices is a zoned as civic employment center. Industrial districts, real straightforward, light and heavy. The light industrial district that's like warehouses and light scale manufacturing. The heavy districts are the more intense industrial uses. So, think about the terminal for the pipeline over on the north side with all those fuel tanks and the dump and the Roseburg particle board plant. That would all be heavy industrial use. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny.
Thank you, Drew.
Yeah.
So I'm going to finish up describing the rest of the zoning regulations. As Drew mentioned, we've spent a number of months trying to refine the language to where it all hopefully fits together. That you may, as we go through it over the next few months, find some inconsistencies or just in general, maybe a policy direction that you want to explore a little bit more. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight and for the rest of the summer at the various meetings. And then after I go through the rest of the regulations, we're going to look at, as Drew mentioned, what's next and what you might be interested in diving into more detail on. So I'm going to describe these chapters as we talked about, kind of at a high level, and hopefully you'll get a chance to look at the text, the document in a little bit more detailed if you have questions about it. But also tonight is a night where we're here to answer those questions. So feel free to stop me midway or at the very end if you want to save up your questions. That works too. So. Drew talked about chapter 2, which describes all of the districts. And then once you get to chapter 3, that chapter is all about building types. And we have different building types for residential, commercial, industrial, and some miscellaneous building types. It describes them so that we can figure out, and there's also a chart that shows which building types are allowed in which districts. Along with that are some building design elements, as it says here, very basic design considerations that will be required on different building types, such as front porches, garage door regulations, and oftentimes when you see a blank wall of a certain length, it really would be a lot more pedestrian or neighborhood friendly if it had a little bit of articulation. So we've put in some requirements for that, but pretty basic building design. And I do want to just draw a distinction at this point. Once we get to chapter 6, it may be confusing because those are site design standards. So I want to just at this point just make the distinction between building design standards and site design standards that we'll talk about in chapter 6. Next slide, please, Drew. Chapter 4 is what Drew would call a boring chapter, although he didn't identify it in the slideshow here as boring, but it's pretty much just how you apply and interpret measurements relative to density and setback and height. It also describes something that is in each district, or many of the districts, not all of them, a build to zone. And it describes how do you measure that build to zone, and it's a range where in each of the districts where it's applicable, you have to place your building rather than a set back a minimum distance, you have to be set back a maximum distance. Like, in other words, you have to be closer to your property line than or within a range of a distance from your property line. So this chapter talks about all of those exceptions to how you measure various space and bulk parameters. So the next chapter, chapter 5, contains about 24 specific use standards. And these standards are in addition to all the other regulations in this document that would be applicable, such as parking requirements. But these uses in particular stand out as needing a little bit of extra regulation to be able to make them fit in the context of the zone that they're allowed. So some examples are ag-related businesses, marijuana dispensary, multiple household dwellings. And those don't necessarily require any kind of special exception review. They're just standards that we could impose or require, I guess, at time of zoning compliance permit, but sometimes they will be special exceptions as well. Chapter 6 are the design, as I mentioned earlier, the site design standards, things that you think about that might apply to an entire site rather than just to the building. Those things are listed there, like parking and loading and unloading, access and circulation, landscaping, screening and fencing, energy efficiency. We have some new standards relative to that. And noise is also somewhat new in the sense that right now we have some very limited noise regulations, but we have taken the opportunity to expand that into a whole chapter that would apply to non-temporary sources of noise and vibration, which has been an issue in the past. And so we wanted to present that to you for consideration, as well as some new lighting standards. So there's some new stuff in there that I think you'll find interesting. Chapter 7 is, I think, of great interest to a lot of people in Missoula. We have talked about riparian protections for a number of decades. We would like to finally put that in our zoning code. That is new, as well as wildland urban interface fire protection standards that we're looking at whether that is best in the zoning and the building code, or more in the building code. And right now we have it currently in our zoning draft. And so those we did have a lot of input from consultants. We got a grant to help us develop zoning regulations relative to wildfire standards in the zoning. So that's what you'll see there. Hillside is something we already have in our zoning, and we hopefully have refined it a little bit, hopefully to be, improved version of our hillside regulations. And then a new zoning regulation relative to floodplain, really focusing on prohibiting uses in the floodplain that floodplain regulations themselves cannot prohibit, but that we would not want to see in the floodplain. Chapter 8, and this is where you will see Drew's fingerprints all over it. Uh-oh, did I lose you? There you are. Signs is chapter 8, and we have sign regulations right now. We're making sure that we're compliant with fairly recent Supreme Court cases, and you may find it boring or you may not.
It's important but boring.
Important, yes, but boring. Chapter 9 is a new chapter, development options and incentives. And this chapter, it takes a lot of brain cells to kind of digest this. There are 6 different development options, 2 of them listed here: conservation design, cottage courts. The others are mobile home parks and tiny home developments, enterprise commercial, which you would know as big box retail, and then historic preservation and adaptive reuse. And looking at how to make those development options available above and beyond the base zoning district. And what do you have to do to qualify or to be able to implement and use those development options? And folded into those development options are, some of them anyway, are the opportunities to get bonuses if you satisfy certain incentives, such as affordable housing. Let me think what the others are. Affordable housing, sustainability, like energy conservation, and let's see how did that play out? I'd say those were the, you can get if you meet some of these incentives, you would be able to get a density bonus. There are also other incentives or bonuses, such as a height allowance increase, an increase in the maximum footprint, parking reduction, and that type of thing. So this chapter lays out how you can do all these different development options. You're going to just pick one of those 6 that I mentioned, and then you may determine that you can also do some density bonus or other type of bonuses if you satisfy the incentives. So, and then I think, if I remember correctly, Drew has characterized the other super boring stuff that we won't go into any kind of intense detail right now, unless people want to talk about it. The introductory provisions, non-conforming.
Dave, as a planner, might really get into this stuff, but most people would find it super boring.
Yeah, that's true. And it is it's the more just administration and enforcement, and definitions play an important role, but to sit down and read definitions is like sitting down to read the dictionary. It's not a lot of fun. So, but all this stuff together makes the package, and it's all important. We need all of it, but we really think, next slide, please, that you're going to want to focus on the super important stuff, chapters 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, which are the zoning districts, the base districts themselves, the building types and building design elements, the specific use standards, site design standards, environmental design standards, and then development options and incentives. But I do think we might have shared a list with you late last week, or maybe even earlier this week, of different topics that you might find might be of interest to you, and we will help you locate where those are. You don't have to memorize the chapters and what's in them. You can just tell us as we have the discussion tonight, topically, what you're interested in as well. I think that might be it for what yeah.
Okay. So moving forward for y'all at the planning board, we're hoping to give you some updates, status reports through this process before we bring you the draft. As we're moving through the public outreach, we're talking to these folks, we're hearing this type of thing. This is kind of what's going on as we move through the public process. And then the main engagement is these topical workshops. So we're going to try to identify the areas of interest that you're interested in, and then we're going to bring those topics to you to get into the details, because there's no way with a 300-page document we can get into the details if we don't kind of narrow it down. All right, so with that, I sent out an email. Unfortunately, it was earlier today, so you haven't much of a chance to look at it, but I'm gonna keep sharing my screen, but step out of the presentation so I can take notes kind of in this But I wanted to ask you, we wanted to ask you, as individuals, as a board, as individuals on the board, what specific areas of the code, are really, really interesting to you that you really care about? And you don't have to say, we don't want you to say like, I'm really interested in ADUs. Tell us generally, is it housing? Is it ag lands? Is it urban design? That will help us figure out what areas we really can get into. And so if anyone is brave enough to say what topics they're interested in learning more about, or really diving into the details, let's hear it. Let's have a discussion.
All right, I'm going to ask. Can I ask a question before we do that, Andrew? Could you?
Yes.
I don't think you covered it, but could you talk about the geographic area, like the scope of this, and is it mostly zoned or unzoned or mixed?
I forget to do that all the time. It's just so natural to me. I know what we're talking about. I don't think we're basically talking about the area from Bonner to the Y, east to west, and then north south, basically the Rattlesnake Wilderness boundary to the southern end of Miller Creek. So not Wolo, not Frenchtown, but Smurfit Stone, not Clinton, not Tura, but Bonner. And I would say most of it's zoned, maybe 25% is unzoned, maybe more, maybe 30% is unzoned. And we do plan to zone the entire area.
Great, thanks. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got, we'll start with Dave and then go to Micah, then Sean.
Thank you, Vince. County, that's quite a process. I have total confidence that it's going to work out, but it's a long road. It's a long road and pretty comprehensive. For me, Mike, since you want to know, for my interest as a planning board member would be agriculture, open space, riparian resource protection standards primarily. I'll just stay right there for now. So the environmental that has been pretty much ignored by the county over the years. I think it needs more work than anything. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Dave.
Micah, you're next.
Yeah, thank you for this introduction to all of this information. It's a lot to take in, but I really appreciate the process that y'all are going through. I think for my own interests, and also I'm hazarding a guess that where a lot of the public comment and interest is going to be is around the different housing and residential use standards. And so I'd love to be really, have a really good grasp of where those different categories are going to fall. And then I'm also interested in sustainability and how that's incorporated into the plan.
Sean, do you want to go?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Vince. And thanks to the county presenters. That was great. I was fortunately Dave hit the environmental one. So I was curious about development incentives and then the special development types.
Great. Yeah. Development incentives are an important component, and they actually are tied to resource protection. So great suggestions.
Anyone else like to venture their preferences here or ask a question of staff? Neva.
All right. Yeah, I don't think all of these ones that have been highlighted are super important. I have a question about what does it mean to say transportation requirements in this list?
Oh, it's very general. If you're interested in the relationship to transportation in the code, we'll bring forward the elements of the code that are related to transportation, and we'll discuss them at a future
Yeah.
point.
Okay,
Yeah.
I guess I was just not clear, like what it was referring to exactly.
Yeah,
With respect to zoning.
We decided to write down a list. It does kind of steer you, but we thought if we just didn't throw out suggestions, and we categorize all these as suggestions, and if you can think of other topics that you want to discuss, we'll do it. But we just felt like if we just gave you a blank sheet right here, it would be hard to respond. So yeah.
That
So
helps. Thanks. Yeah. I guess the other, I don't
do you
know
want me
that
to highlight? I'm sorry, Neva. Do you want me to highlight transportation
not
requirements?
necessarily. I was just asking what you were referring to.
Yep.
Although, I am, it is too bad that with the Swipticane plan, we weren't able to build in more sort of like, rapid transit type of things, and because Mountain Line, determines a lot of that. So that's why I was kind of asking, because I was like, well, I wasn't sure how it fit in, but okay. And the other thing I think that we do, not going to add everything on your list, but I do think we should talk about the wildland urban interface. It came up a lot in that Grant Creek issue. I think these are going to probably be somewhat new type things for us. I think it's an excellent idea to include those standards, especially like what we've been seeing happening like in California and so many people losing their homes. And so we really need to take that seriously. I mean, not that you weren't, but I that's why I think it's a good one to put on the list for us.
Yeah, totally agree. They're going to be new to Missoula County. It's going to be a hard pill for some people to swallow. So great thing that we should discuss. Absolutely.
Great.
I'll just echo the interest in sustainability, housing, and agriculture is kind of my dominant ones, but I'm glad all of these are highlighted already. So thanks, guys.
Excellent.
Andrew, I think with the Swipticane plan, I think in the zoning code, the form-based code that was included with that, I think some of the elements of transportation, parking, and site design were really, really interesting. I think they really pushed the envelope there for ways to really, from all fronts, to really encourage a reduction in automobile usage, which is a big part of city and county plans. So I hate to have all these highlighted here, Andrew, but
it's okay. This is still a manageable list. We'll get through this. I'm gonna kind of pretend that parking requirements is lumped into the site and urban design discussion. Vince, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll touch on it.
Any more comments from planning board members?
Well, I have a question, unless somebody else wants to chime in.
Is it about this, or should I stop sharing so I can see everyone's face?
You can stop sharing.
Okay. So this is a great list. It's very similar, although not exactly similar, to the list that our steering committee put together earlier today. So great list.
Good. Yeah, I had a couple of questions or thoughts. Jenny and I had visited a little bit about some of the ag, zoning and like whether we could somehow, sort of promote certain types of agriculture over others, right? Like so you mentioned, for instance, Andrew, like we wouldn't have a feedlot, you know, in this most of this rural residential and ag zoning. And so then it started making me wonder after I talked to Jenny and I saw you had marijuana dispensaries on there, but we should be sure that we look at marijuana production, because I didn't even think about it till after I talked with Jenny, but of course it's becoming legal. Unfortunately, from my point of view, a lot of the marijuana production in the country is now highly industrialized, highly energy consumptive. They spray, they do it indoors, you know, and so I think it's something we want to kind of look at before it becomes a thing, you know, and then anyway, maybe that you already thought of that, but that was one thought I had. And then, you know, like maybe in one of the ways of kind of determining sort of what kinds of agriculture could happen in an area, you know, we could do it sort of by saying what's not allowed, right? Like, so you can't, you know, put a massive marijuana production facility in the middle of orchard homes or something, right? Or what's, you know, the feedlot's not allowed or whatever. So like you're actually like saying no to certain ag uses as opposed to trying to say which ag uses are allowed. In other words, we're trying to get at this intensity of agricultural use. So anyway, those are just a few more thoughts, but I know that Oregon has seen in particular a lot of really nasty industrial pot production. And I'm not having any problem with pot, you know, but I have a problem with that kind of production process. And I don't think we want it surrounding Missoula. Well, or maybe others do. I don't.
Yeah, the marijuana, the growing operations, we intend, I don't know if we've hit a home run on this one in the code or not, but our intent is that they would be categorized as a high intensity agricultural use along like a commercial chicken farm. That's the type of thing we're seeing it like on that sort of a level. So you would see it in the large lot agricultural zones outside of town or in the industrial areas, but you wouldn't be able to have it. A dispensary can't grow weed. They can sell weed, they can't grow weed. And you wouldn't see a marijuana, an indoor marijuana growing operation in a target range. Doesn't mean someone couldn't grow marijuana in target range if they wanted to on a non-industrial scale, according to state law. Yeah, so we have thought about that stuff, but we'll get into detail on that, on the differences.
Yeah, I realize that's kind of in the weeds.
Yeah,
so to speak. It's kind of in the weeds, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Andrew, I have a question that's somewhat similar about special uses. The cryptocurrency regulations that we considered a few months ago and I think was passed by the county commissioners, how does that relate to this? Is it included, you know, by default, or is that going to be addressed again in a different way?
Yep, I think that's right up Jenny's alley.
So Vince, the cryptocurrency regulations that you just heard in January and the commissioners adopted in February, March, apply countywide, but we did incorporate them into this draft to essentially be the same regulations with just a little bit of, well, do you remember when I was describing in chapter 6 how we've developed a whole new chapter on noise, or a whole new section on noise. So our current cryptocurrency mining regulations just use our existing noise standards and special exception reviews in our chapter 4 that have kind of low level restrictions on noise. So we took whatever we had in our current cryptocurrency mine regulations and brought them into this document into chapter 5 under specific use standards. So you'll see that one of the couple dozen is cryptocurrency mining. It doesn't look exactly the same because we addressed other impacts like noise in a different way, in a different location, but we made sure that all the things that were of concern to the commissioners and this board are addressed in some fashion in this document, essentially the same or better than we did through the overlay a few months ago.
Great, thanks for that explanation. Yeah, that was a lot of great work, and so that's good to hear.
Thanks.
Are there any more questions for Jenny or Andrew?
Dave has his hand up.
I think I think you forgot to put it down. But Dave, would you like to say anything else? Okay. Okay, well, Jenny and Andrew, thank you so much for joining us and getting us involved at this stage, taking this piece by piece. I think I look forward to the process and working with you all throughout the rest of the year.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vince. We're looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, and I would just add a kind of a little bit of a conclusion that our hope is that by getting you really familiar and comfortable with parts of or all of this document, by the time this is coming to you for public hearing, you can focus more on the comments and the public testimony than having to try to struggle through learning it at the same time. So we really appreciate you giving us this time this summer to walk you through these topics. And I think it will definitely be, you know, there will be some times when it gets confusing, and we will do our very best to try to walk you through it. So
great, thank you, and good luck.
Well, and I really appreciate you guys too. And for the newer board members, you should know that this is the most important thing. I've been on this board for almost 6 years now. This is going to be the most important thing that we vote on in my 6 years here. And, you know, so it's an honor to be able to work with you guys all on this and making this a reality, because it's just so key. And I know Jenny and Andrew have put a ton of work into this. So I just really appreciate that. And I'm so excited that it's here and that you're doing a great public involvement process as always. So thank you.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Neva. Thank you, Vince. Thanks, board.
Great. Well, feel free to stick around. We're going to move on to our next items on the agenda. So next item is committee reports. I believe, Shane, was there a TPCC meeting this afternoon?
There was a TPCC meeting this afternoon. We had the long range transportation folks back, and they are seeking public comment on the draft long range transportation plan. They're hoping to get all of their comments from the public by Friday. So if folks are interested in taking a look at that and commenting on the long range transportation plan, it's online somewhere right now, and I'm sure you can Google it and find it. And there were a couple of minor agenda items that are, not particularly important for this board here. So, yeah, that was the gist of it.
What's TPCC?
Transportation planning. Help me out here, Vince.
Elliot, stands for the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, and it is staffed primarily by Aaron Wilson and his staff at the MPO, the Missoula Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is housed within the city of Missoula, what was previously Development Services. So on that board, so they govern that board approves all expenditures of federal transportation funding in the region. And the board is comprised of representatives from city, mostly a lot of elected officials from the city, the county, Missoula or Montana Department of Transportation, and other organizations. The Federal Transit Administration has a position on the board, and the planning board in the bylaws. We have a position, a voting position, I believe. Is it voting, Shane? Yeah, on the TPCC. So we'll hear updates from Shane whenever they have meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shane. Are there any other questions for Shane? Okay, great. We'll move on to old business. So the election of a vice president for the remainder of this year. We've taken this up a few times now, and we are still in need of someone to volunteer to serve as the vice president for the remainder of the year. As a reminder, the responsibilities include running the meetings when I am not available. And there are also pre-planning board meetings before each planning board meeting. So if hopefully you guys have had a chance to think about this. If anyone has found a desire to serve, that'd be most welcome. I don't plan on missing any meetings in the near future, but it certainly will be the case at some point. So if anyone's interested, feel free at this point to nominate yourself or express your desire, and I will certainly be willing to nominate someone as well.
And so Vince, usually the vice chair then moves up to be the chair generally, right?
That's how it's worked, Neva. But
Well,
you know, I
Helen
did check.
didn't do that, yeah.
Yeah, I checked with Donna today, and just to kind of go over some situations that might occur. And there were 2 points that were interesting. One, you know, in the event that the president and vice president both can't make a meeting, it's happened before where, you know, we would just choose at the beginning of the meeting someone among ourselves to run through the agenda. The second point is, you know, if you do serve as vice president, you know, while it's been the convention to move into the role of president if it becomes available, that's not it's not necessary. You can decline that if you'd like, and that would be totally acceptable. So
All right, Vince, I'll volunteer.
all right, Sean. Thank you very much, Sean. That's great. That's
With
great.
my stipulations I emailed you about.
Yeah,
It does
great.
require a regular meeting on Tuesday, right?
Yep,
On
yep. We
Monday
meet on
to
Tuesdays
prep-
at 12:30. Yep.
To prep for the thing, just so you know.
Great, great. Yeah, Sean and I talked a little bit prior to the meeting, and yeah, Sean, thank you very much for volunteering. I think it'd be great to have you in that role. I'll go ahead and nominate Sean for vice president. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
All right, Neva seconds. Okay. John, would you like to say anything or vote?
No, thanks. I appreciate the vote of confidence from everybody.
Great. And thank you, Sean, for volunteering. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, Sean is now vice president for the remainder of 2021. Okay, so last item on the agenda before we adjourn are comments from planning board members. So this is the time to talk about anything that's on your mind. Dave, I see your hand raised.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. First of all, at the beginning, I'm extremely disappointed about the late call by the applicants. But I wanted to put, so I'll just put it out there now for them to consider that there's a significant riparian brushy draw issue that I don't feel in the present subdivision design is adequately accommodated. Anyway, so I would like kind of heads up, be prepared to speak to that issue. And how are you going to prevent runoff from the road, and are you going to use lot 8 or not? And if so, where? And better setbacks. I want to get that out there. So hopefully they're here.
Dave, are you referencing the subdivision that was on the
There was
agenda today?
subdivision that they pulled off from under us at the last second. They had an issue apparently with a variance, but I have other issues. So I will just put it out there.
Great,
That's
thanks.
how I am. Thank you.
Well, Dave, if you do have specific questions for staff or things you'd like for them to address, please feel free to contact them before or after this meeting. They've mentioned that before. Sometimes if any of us ever, have reviewed the materials and have questions, they've invited us to send them to them in advance. So maybe you've already done that, but if not.
I have not. This is a whole new thing, and I wasn't able to even read the background until today, and it just popped out at me. So I'll try to get hold of Tim, tell him what my concerns are. Anyway, and talk about the details later. They can do a better job. That's all I'm going to say.
Great. I would say I haven't followed the state legislature too closely this year. I know we've heard from some folks here that have followed it more, but I did see something or heard something on the radio that statewide they prohibited inclusionary zoning across the state, which was a surprise to me. It's something we talked about, and it's not something that's gained too much traction, I don't think, locally here, but certainly on my mind was something that I was hopeful would become more of an issue. So I was disappointed to hear that.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Because that bill basically eliminated inclusionary zoning that exists now in Whitefish and in Bozeman. And I was also hopeful we would go somewhat that route somehow. The other thing that I actually now, since Karen and Andrew maybe will hear more about this, but there were a bunch of bad zoning and land use bills, particularly zoning, that died. But when they died, the kind of agreement was that they were going to try to work on zoning in the interim between now and the next legislative session. So, like it was maybe going to be a study bill and then get, they fund certain studies. I do not know the status of that, but I will try to find out. And maybe the staff knows but we really have to follow this. And I really think it's unconstitutional for them to eliminate the local police power to protect, citizenry. But we really have to watch this because we could do this whole zoning thing over the next 6 months. And actually Jenny has been working on it for a couple of years. So, it's like we could lose all that, and we have to be sure that we somehow set ourselves up right to not. I don't know what the answer is exactly.
Vote them out of office. That's our best.
Yeah, absolutely. You know me, I'm there. But the ones that are doing this, I mean,
they're going against everything they tell their constituents they're for. So it shouldn't be too tough.
I don't know. I mean, there's a few people up there that are really championing, trying to ruin our ability to plan locally. And, it's really.
You can't come up there.
Well, I mean, I'm frustrated on a bunch of levels because I think there are local organizations here in town that really that have connections with those statewide organizations that were leading the show. And those local groups did nothing. They took no position. So they say, well, it wasn't us, it's the state group. Well, that doesn't work. And I'm happy putting this on the record because silence in this case was taking a position. And so, while we decry the legislators at the state level, these bills have all been around for session after session after session. I mean, they come back every time, and they've been vetoed previously because of Governor Bullock and Governor Schweitzer. So these are not just a function of today's legislature, you know what I mean? They're a function of these interest groups that really, like, literally don't want to build affordable housing in communities, so that, you know, they went after the inclusionary zoning. And that's just one bill. I mean, they also eliminated our ability, as you hopefully all know, to consider agricultural soils when we consider subdivision review. They require that we will still have to consider the impact to agriculture. So I can't wait for the first subdivision to come in that's on ag soil, and let them tell us how they are going to assess the impact to agriculture, because they had completely eliminated the only measurable tool. And, you know, what happened previous to the measurable tool, just so you guys know, was subdivision after subdivision came in and said, oh, it's an incremental loss. It's another 100 acres here. It's 30 acres there. It's 40 acres there, you know, and 30,000 acres later, we've lost a lot of ag land. And so anyway, I guess I do think that, you know, and partly they're after us in Missoula, but, you know, they're not just after us. They're after any community that wants to actually ensure affordability, doesn't, you know, wants to have some innovative land use planning. So anyway, thanks for bringing that up. You kind of got me fired up. You know, wouldn't be a planning board meeting if I didn't get fired up. But you know, it's really bad. It's really bad what they're trying to do, in my opinion.
Well, thank you, Neva. I appreciate learning from you here about these things. And, you know, I think for a lot of us and some of the issues that are really important to us, we really seem to be up against a lot at the state level. So it really does behoove us to, you know, learn as much as we can. These are really challenging and technical issues a lot of times, and it has a big impact on what we do here and how the community develops. So. Okay, any more comments? All right, nice to see everyone. Thank you for your time.
You. Welcome,
Enjoy
Ellie.
the rest of your night.
Thanks for having me, everyone. Nice to see you all. Vince?